There's a kind of panic that doesn't show up when things aren't working. It shows up after things do start to work, after those early wins, after the momentum, after you finally feel like, okay, this might be it. And then out of nowhere, things start to slow down. Nothing breaks, nothing collapses, but from the outside, everything still is looking fine. But internally, you know that something has changed because now you're not just building, you're waiting with expectations, right? You know you put this work in. And that waiting feels heavier than starting from zero ever did. That moment messed with me more than any failure that I'd experienced before. And it took me a while to understand why. It took me a while. It did. Because a couple years ago, when I launched my book publishing business, 30daybook.launch.com, it started out very strong, stronger than most other businesses that I had launched before then. And I was so happy. I can't even front. I landed 4 clients almost immediately. They all came from my existing network. I'm talking paid clients, real results. I'm talking about books getting created and really validating the offer that I was putting out in the marketplace. The momentum felt real. It wasn't imagined. It wasn't forced. And my offer, more than anything, was validated. And I was just so excited because it wasn't unrealistic. I just was encouraged that this is going to finally work. Then after those initial after those initial projects were wrapped, started to have some more conversations lined up, some prospects, and, momentum was still building. And then out of nowhere, as you can imagine, it slowed. I had 2 people that ghosted me. One was actually somebody that I knew in my past network, just out of nowhere, stopped responding. Then another person was somebody that I had a really great call with. They were ready to go. I sent over the contract and then nothing, crickets. And that's when that quiet panic, man, it started to show up. Not because the offer didn't work, not because my clients weren't happy, not because the service I was providing wasn't high quality. All of that was already proven. The panic was simple. It was, where are the next clients coming from? And underneath that question, there was something deeper that I didn't recognize at the time. See, early success had quietly reshaped how I thought growth was supposed to feel. And looking back, I can see 3 ways that those early wins created unrealistic expectations about timing and growth, and none of them meant that I was off track. So the first one is this: early wins distort our sense of time. When results come faster than we expected at the beginning, our nervous system begins to recalibrate what that normal progress feels like. So you stop measuring growth in seasons, and then you start to measure it in weeks, right? So when the progress slows to a sustainable pace, it don't feel natural. It feels like, something is off, something went wrong, even though nothing is wrong. And nothing did go wrong. See, reality reasserts itself. And instead of reading that as stability, we read it as, we're regressing. That's what happened to me. And maybe you can relate to it. Momentum didn't disappear. It just stopped accelerating. And because my internal clock had been compressed by those early wins, that slowdown started to feel like there was a problem that I needed to fix. And see, this is where that second distortion is a little bit more subtle. See, early traction creates a false sense of progress. See, early momentum often comes from novelty, energy, untapped opportunities, and very low resistance. It usually doesn't come from the systems yet or the compounding work that we put in. But my mind assumed if it started fast, it should keep going fast. So when growth naturally starts to shift from acceleration into a slower, more natural pace, it starts to feel like we're not making progress. But that's not failure. That's reality. And I thought because the offer was validated, because the results were real, because the service was strong, and the client acquisition at the start was so easy, that it would continue to be and that it should continue to be. But it wasn't. See, I still had to learn how to consistently find the right clients. I still had to deal with the no's. I still had to refine who I was targeting. I still had to face the reality that even though I know my service is obviously valuable, it doesn't mean that it's automatically going to convert. See, the growth didn't stop. It just stopped coming as easy as it did at the start. And that transition is where a lot of people tend to panic unnecessarily, myself included. Now, the third distortion is the quietest, and it's the most emotionally expensive. See, early validation raises the emotional cost of waiting. Once you've been validated, waiting feels so much riskier. Not because the effort is hard, but because now you feel like you have something to lose. You got credibility, momentum, identity, and that version of yourself that has finally figured it out. So when you start experiencing delay, it stops feeling like patience and it starts to feel more like a threat. See, that's when people start pivoting way too fast, changing things that they don't need changing and abandoning paths that are still working. I'm guilty of that. For me, that delay felt like, man, I thought I was about to take a huge leap when it comes to my business. But in hindsight, it wasn't a leap. It was a step, maybe two, right? And that was hard for me to accept in the moment. Man, see, just looking back, man, those steps were actually bigger than I gave them credit for. See, I had a validated offer. I had happy clients that were pleased with the service I provided, and I had a service based model that didn't hinge on delivering a specific performance outcome. So, the ability to charge a high ticket price without carrying that pressure, that was huge. That was a real leap. I just didn't see it that way, right? They just weren't those dramatic type of early momentum leaps that I had made and expected, right? So there's a reframe that I wish I had a lot earlier, and I want to share with you. It's this: early success doesn't mean that the hard part is over. It means that you've entered a different phase. It's a quieter phase, a more technical phase, a phase where the progress looks a lot less exciting, but it's going to be more stable. That doesn't disqualify you. It doesn't mean you miss your moment. And it definitely doesn't mean that something is wrong. It means that your timeline is expanding and coming back to reality, right? It's not compressed anymore. And the reality is where things that last actually get built. So I want you to notice you're not behind, you're not regressing, you're learning how to work past that initial excitement. And sometimes the biggest growth doesn't feel like a leap at all. It just feels like staying steady, staying on your path, even when your emotions want you to react. And that steadiness, it's not delay, it's not stagnation, it's not failure. That's reality. That's maturity. That's life. That's a part of business. And if part of what this stirred up for you is that familiar thought of maybe I'm just failing, maybe this shouldn't be this hard, then I just want you to know you're not alone in that either. I felt that way too. That feeling tends to show up, right when our expectations and reality, they stop lining up. And it's not because something is wrong with you, but it's because you're misreading the phase that you're in right now. I talked about that a lot more directly in another video, the feeling of failure, where it comes from and why it's often the wrong conclusion. So if this one resonated with you, that conversation will definitely connect the dots, and I invite you to check it out. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.